The data shows that most people lose money on altcoins, not because they picked the wrong coin, but they bought at the wrong time. I hold myself in that crew. People tend to chase the hype, ignore the macro signals, and just jump into a coin because it's trending on X or YouTube. In this video, I'm going to go through the 3 fundamental charts that you need to check every single time before touching any altcoin. This will stop you getting wrecked like I nearly did in 2022. Smash the like button if you've got absolutely destroyed by an altcoin. And let me know in the comments which altcoin did the most damage. For me, Polkadot. But I'll come on to that in a bit. I'm going to explain what I've done wrong. Just to give you a bit of an outline. It's all to do with the FTX crash. It's going to come very, very relevant in a second. Now, you can see on the screen here, that little area, $15,000 Bitcoin. That was when the FTX crash happened. So it collapsed in November 2022. And I made the mistake of buying Bitcoin, but also buying altcoins in the expectation of a bounce. From the prior cycles, often you'd find with opportunity like that, they would bounce. But ultimately, they didn't. A couple did, Solana did. But when you look at the likes of Ethereum, which we'll go through in a bit, and other altcoins, they didn't. We'll also pair it with other charts and showcase that, well, I was just going off blind faith. And that's where you go wrong. You need to wait for all the things to align. And now I often talk about it. If you've watched my previous videos, and feel free to subscribe and stuff, but I talk about how you need to have your ducks in a row, and there's more downtrends and uptrends in altcoins. They tend to be very cyclical, and they tend to just blast off out of nowhere, and then you get caught out by the hype and euphoria, and then you start getting led down the wrong path. The problem is this happens all too often, and it's proven here. So let's look at the other charts that we need to keep an eye on, but in this time zone. We'll go through them in more detail, but just to showcase, this was again the FTX crash on the FTX area, essentially around here, give or take. This is what happened. The problem is, for you to buy altcoins, this chart needs to be going up. It actually continued dropping, and now it's at 0.12. But as I say, we'll come on to this in more detail on how to get it onto your chart. Now, for the stable currency dominance, it was the opposite way around. This was high. And usually when it's high and it's trending down, it's normally a good time to buy. But the money went into Bitcoin. But this is where it went really wrong. This is the FTX crash area on the total 3/BTC. This is where I got it majorly wrong. I did it when it was very high. And you can see it's bled quite a lot since then. That's the top pretty much. Now let's talk about something quickly before we jump on. Ethereum.D, and also a part that no one wants to talk about as a content creator. I was holding altcoins only because, realistically, I was talking about them, I was involved in the ecosystem, and I was quite happy to do so, but I was also blind. Let's be honest. Blind to the race because I was too close to it, let's be honest. And when you see charts like this, and this is Ethereum.D, you know, I'll give you the real life example of Polkadot.D. This is the worst one. And this is where I needed to change my attitude, and I have, obviously, over the last year done so. The problem is risk management was fundamental for me surviving, luckily, with having high Bitcoin. But as I've alluded to it, the reasons why it went wrong was because the market didn't behave as you expected to. You would expect, in a situation of a crash, things to bounce. They didn't. They just got worse and worse and worse. So this is why we're in a bit of a pickle, and we still are, technically. Now, here we are, present day. Let's talk about the 3 obvious charts that you need to check to know that altcoins are going to do something nice. Now, first and foremost, to get this on your chart, feel free to pause the video and just put that in. This is all of the stable currencies that have got some weight, let's be honest. Tether, USDC, and DAI. Now, what does this signify? Well, in a nutshell, with it rising, it equals risk off. With it falling, it equals risk on. Simple as that. Now, when we talk about these 2 areas here, these were the 2 previous alt seasons we technically had. This was when AI was booming at the start of 2024, end of 2023. And this is when like the XLM and, you know, Hedra Hashgraph, XRP and stuff like that was pumping because of the ISO coins. We had that little bit of a flurry at the end of the year. And then Jerome Powell kind of ruined the market completely. Thanks, Jerome. Arsehole. So, that's the obvious. Now, we talk about this in terms of the trend, and we've had a change of character here on the weekly time frame. This is signifying a potential alt season could be around the corner if we drop. Now, if we get a bounce, or well, a drop, sorry, into this zone, we're going to get an altcoin bounce. They've obviously dropped a lot, and it's an important factor. The individual altcoin that you need to look at is obviously the most important. We'll come towards that at the end, so don't go away. But to get all your ducks in a row, you need to have this alongside this chart, which is a total 3/BTC. Again, feel free to pause the video to get this on your chart. You need to look at getting that on your screen. It's very, very straightforward. It's very, very easy. Now, this is not signifying a proper full-blown alt season run yet, because guess what? It's at the lows. If this bounces off this region and goes higher, it may well become very interesting for your individual altcoins in those BTC pairs. This measures the altcoin market versus Bitcoin. If to signify an alt season, your altcoin has to run against Bitcoin. Simple as that, right? Because that will come important at the end when I talk about pricing. Rising equals altcoin strength. Simple as that. You're looking for breakouts, you're looking for a trending market, and you want it to go high. And as I've alluded to it, I was buying altcoins because I'm an idiot at the tops when FTX was crashing, expecting a bounce because I'm a loser. And the final one, and the most obvious one technically, is OTHERS.D. This is a rising and a falling of the broader altcoin market. Now, this again on your screen is OTHERS.D. Very, very easy to get onto your chart. Now, what this is, as I say, rising equals a broad altcoin strength because it's others, the 125 technically, dominances all combine into one, so to speak. Now, when you see this spiking and really flying, it equals the late stages of alt seasons. Now, when you start seeing these sort of runs, so obviously I mentioned it before, we had a bit of a run in terms of the end of last year into basically, you probably remember it. My channel was going berserk at that point. Then it fell. Again, this was when XRP and stuff was going. So when you see it rising really, really hard and it really spiking, you're probably going to see the end of it. Falling equals exit risk. You need to jump out secondly, because where we are right now, we're at 8%. We're lows. Once it starts changing character and going up, you may well see some differences. Obviously, another thing as well, if you want to, you don't have to, others/BTC, which I mentioned before, is the other side of it. This is the BTC pair in terms of the overall kind of metric in the Bitcoin pair. Not as good, but ultimately they both play a part because it's talking about the other altcoins. Now, I'm going to blow your brains a little bit. Bitcoin dominance works, but it can be misleading. Because its only metric is Bitcoin versus everything, you're going to find that this will give you some false dawns. And you can see here, as this dropped quite significantly, a lot of people, especially in my Discord and my Patreon, feel free to jump in. It's a $5, or well, to get the videos, or if it's a $10 if you want to get in terms of the Discord. People were getting very, very excited when that was dropping. But that was only because XLM and Hedra Hashgraph and XRP were pumping and nothing else was. All the other signals weren't showing anything, which was kind of a bit unfortunate in terms of the others and stuff. There was a little bit of a flurry, but nothing crazy, nothing like the previous years. And again, we talk about it. We talk about that end of year kind of run of 2023 into 2024. Bitcoin dominance didn't show it because Bitcoin was really flying. You had a duplicate. You had Bitcoin rising equals higher USD prices, which we'll come on to, into a better Satoshi value. So it wasn't really reflected as much on here, which is a shame. So you need to remember that this is good, but it doesn't really give you the bigger, broader picture. And I said it before, your individual altcoins are absolutely crucial in terms of what's trending. This is why I don't invest more. I trade more because I can pick them and not be as exposed. So when this starts to stall, it signifies a potential alt season. But it doesn't account for stable currencies, obviously. It could create false signals if the stable currency dominance starts to rise. This is why this chart isn't enough on its own. Now, the final bit, and the bit that really blows brains, I'm sorry, is the fact that people forget that their altcoin/BTC is the true price of their altcoin. So if you look at Ethereum, for example, here, 0.01903, which is 1,903 Satoshis. If you put this into Google, it will equal that. I know, blowing your brains, haven't I? Sorry. So this is basically the overall metric. So this is why I say to people, you need to have a performing altcoin that's outperforming Bitcoin. And this is where people get it wrong. Basically, long story short, is Bitcoin flies to 200K and Ethereum goes up in value. They think it's an alt season when actually the Satoshi values might actually be going down. Not good. Not a good look. You're losing Satoshis. So you always need to check the structure on the BTC pair if you can, especially on the majors, to see if it's actually running as well, because that's kind of the thing here. Now, don't get me wrong, if you're a trader, you can win here by Bitcoin doing well. Basically, they may not pump as much, but there's a little bit of a multiplier there and you can make some money. But as soon as Bitcoin starts to lag a bit or stall, your altcoins are going to fall pretty hard, which is why sometimes investing isn't fun, which is why you probably lost a lot of money in Ethereum, for example. And likewise, we've had a roaring bull market technically in Bitcoin from 15K to 110K in a very, very short period of time. But your altcoin / BTC is stuck like this, for example. Even if you're in a bull market elsewhere, you may not be in a bull market in this, which is why your individual altcoins matter a lot more than you think. Now, if you do want to trade, obviously check out links below to Blowfin, but these charts do save your life a little bit, let's be honest. If you're trying to trade the market and trying to just get onto opportunities and find the hype, go for it. If you can find sentiment in the euphoria and everything aligns, as in your altcoins looking good, the rest of the market is looking relatively good, and people are starting to return to the market and everyone's getting really, really excited, trade it and ride the momentum, ride the trend. But let me know in the comments, what chart do you prefer to look at? I know a lot of people will say Bitcoin dominance, but I'm hoping I've opened your eyes here.